At the beginning of our series, I shared a story about how my son had scanned a room full of people and said, "Mom, everything inside me wants these people to know about Jesus." And I love that statement because it reflects the very heart of God. The God who, as 1 Timothy says, desires all people to be saved and come to the knowledge of truth. Over the last few days, we've been talking about what it means to see people the way God sees them. And I've found that even when our hearts align with His and even when we want to share, starting that conversation can feel overwhelming. We think, what do I say? Or what if I say the wrong thing? We've all been there, and that's why I love today's closing passage, because Paul addresses the way we speak with outsiders. And though he doesn't give us an exact script, Paul gives us something even more powerful, an attitude that, when embraced, will make all the difference. Let's look at it together. Colossians 4:6 says, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." Now, notice what Paul is not saying. He's not saying, let your speech be marked by arguments or judgments. He's not saying we should list everything someone's doing wrong. No, he says, let your speech always be full of grace and love. And then he adds, seasoned with salt. It's such a fun picture, isn't it? Think about it. Salt brings things to life. You know, sometimes I'll make some avocado toast for my kids, and when I forget the salt, they know instantly. Why? Because the salt enhances the flavor. It makes it enjoyable, something they desire or want more of. And in the same way, Paul is telling us that our conversations with unbelievers should be gracious and warm, something they're drawn to and something they enjoy. But you might think, well, that's great, but I'm not a very outgoing person. Well, I get it. And the good news is we don't have to be. Sometimes the most gracious thing we can do is to simply ask a thoughtful question and listen. In fact, one of the best conversations I had recently started that way. I was on a flight home sitting next to a young man in the military. From our conversation, I learned he was living a pretty wild life. And rather than being judgmental, I asked questions about his life in the military. Well, after he shared his experience, a question came to my mind that opened the door. I said, "It sounds like you have a very busy schedule. Did they give you Sundays off, or did they give you a church service?" And that one question began a very real conversation about faith. And what I discovered is this young man had a deep spiritual hunger. And in the end, I shared the gospel with him. You know, we can think evangelism is preaching on the streets or rehearse scripts, but evangelism is all about engaging people and leading them one step closer to Jesus. So friends, as we close today, let me ask you, what if we really allowed this passage to shape our lives? What if we started praying for that person in our life? What if we prayed for open doors? What if we walked in wisdom and made the most of every opportunity? And what if our conversations were something unbelievers enjoyed and were drawn to? Just think of what God can do. So here's my challenge. Ask God to show you one person who needs a conversation that is full of grace. You could start by praying, "God, give me the eyes to see the opportunity." Then, when that moment comes, ask a simple question about their life. Be gracious and warm and simply follow the Spirit's lead. Because here's the beautiful truth we've discovered. Evangelism isn't cold conversations and awkward moments. No, it's about joining God in His passion for people. And He invites us to join Him in changing lives, one grace-filled conversation at a time.